Okay, welcome to the video for Proof of Understanding number 3 for the 3ds Max class. In this video, we're going to cover what the expectations are for the third POU, and basically what we're going to be covering is creating our first renders that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go into our courses and open up our assignments here. If I go to our assignments tab, I'm going to go to POU number 3, Proof of Understanding. So we're going to be covering rendering and creating our first still image. Expectations is you want to submit a PNG or a JPEG file of the still render from your video. If you have a video as well, I'll show you how to do that in the video, but you don't have to get a full render out just because we were running out of time in class. You also want to turn in a with your file submission, just tell me about how long it takes for each render to takes, so then you can keep track of how long it's going to do a full video render. You're also going to turn in your 3ds Max file or your Blender file. So I'm going to jump over into here, and I just have this file folder that I'm working on. These are some of the files we were working on in class. I have my prop set and my first phase assignment. So I'm just going to open up Blender and check out what we have. And inside here you can see I already have my city that I've been working on, and I have a couple cameras inside here. I have this one camera that's flying through my scene, and then I have another one that I was working on for other stuff earlier. So this is the camera I'm going to be working on animating. So first thing that I'm going to do is I might want to open a preview or a second window inside of Blender to see what the camera is looking at. If you remember how to open a new window, I can just go up here to the top of this little screen in this box and just kind of favor the side I'm going to drag towards so that I can pull a new window in here. If you remember, if I kind of go on the opposite side to like this window, and if I drag back over here, it rejoins those areas. So that's all I'm doing, is opening a new window. And this one here, I can just go in and click my little camera icon to turn on my camera view. Now you can see it's going to the wrong camera. I want the other camera for our render. So I have two cameras in this scene. So all I'm going to do is right click on the camera I want, which is camera 001. That's the second one that I was using later on. So I'm just going to right click and say set active camera. Now that's the active camera. I should be able to click the camera button and it'll go to that view. I want to keep this workspace as my working workspace. And there we go. So now if I hit my space bar or the play button, I can see the camera flying around in 3D space, and then over here I can see the render preview of what it actually is looking like for my render. So inside of here, if I want to create a render, you have to be on a camera. So I already animated my camera with some keyframes that I covered in the POU number 2. So it's already set and ready to go. I'm just going to find somewhere for a still image. This looks pretty good. So from here, if I want to render this out, there's a few things that we're going to cover. First things first is if I go up here to the top and say render an image, that's how I can do still images, and then right below that is render animation. So first things first, if I want to render an image, we're going to go through some of our settings for this assignment. Over here on the right of the screen, you can see I can go to this camera and go to render properties, and there is where we're going to select our rendering engine and a lot of the settings for our project. I might have already adjusted some of these settings, so I'll just show you a lot of the settings that I've already adjusted. In here, for this assignment, Eevee is a really good rendering engine to get started with, where it's not too complicated to use. It produces pretty good results. It's not always the best, but it's a really good one to get started with. If you want more control over your rendering and add a little more complexity to stuff, Cycles is going to be a little bit more complicated to use, but it's going to produce a lot better results. So first, we're going to start in Eevee. And to get started in there, I don't think I changed any settings in my Eevee settings. So we can just go up here to render, render image, and it's going to render out an image, and we can see what that's going to look like. We can see in the top left up here my time. It took about 0.5 milliseconds or so, or 0.52 seconds, I guess, so 52 milliseconds. So from there, this image is ready to go, and that's a nice still render, but I'm going to close this out, and we're going to see if we can save this file somewhere else automatically. So I'm going to go to this output tab, and inside my output you can choose your resolution here. You also have for videos, right below it you have your frames per second. Right below that is your frame range, and I have my frame rate at 30 frames per second, so I have 360 frames, which is 12 seconds of a video. And then I'm also going to go to this output tab. The output is going to be where we're going to save all of our files from when we're rendering. So I'm just going to hit the little file icon, and I'm going to go to my desktop. I made a folder, POU number 3 on there, and I'm just going to say this is POU number 1 or number 3. There we go. Maybe even do test. There we go. Test video or image, and I'm just going to hit accept. So from here, if I have that saved, by default, I've already changed this one, but I'm just doing a still image, so we're just going to say media type on image for a still frame. If you're doing a video, that's where we can go to media type and change that to video as well. But we're going to leave it on image for right now, and we're going to go into post-processing. It looks like it's compositing and doing the sequencer. I'm going to leave all that stuff by default. Metadata, I'm going to leave all that by default. Color management and pixel density, I can leave all that as well. But from there, I'm ready to render this out as an image. So now I can go in here, do render, and render an image. Now weirdly enough, even though I chose my location and I rendered this image out, it didn't save it automatically for me. I think it used to, and there might be a setting that I just need to go back and find so that we can have it save the individual images. But once we have our render result window popped up, we can just go to image, save as, and we're just still in their same POU number 3, and I'm just going to save this image as POU3 render. Sometimes if we're testing things out, maybe it's good to add like some numbers or something like that, 001 or something to keep track of the renders that you're working on. From there, I'm going to hit save image, and then I can close this window down, and now I can see I have my PNG image here, and I can turn this in for the file, and then turn in everything else like the Blender file, the image, and then tell you, or at least turn in the length of how long it takes to render it. To see how long it takes to render that image, since I already rendered it, I can just go to render and view render, and it'll reopen that last window. And right there for my time, it took 0.51 seconds. So let's just go to my courses and just see about doing all that. So here I can go to add a file here, and I'm going to go to my computer, and first thing I'm going to bring in my my image, and then I'm also going to bring in my city fly-through that I'm using for this. So there's that file and my Blender file. Add those two together, and then I can just go in here and I can just say it took 0.51 seconds. So there it took about that long, so I can say, there we go. Ooh. There we go. So now that's enough for this first POU. You can turn that in, and then you can just hit submit, and then that's ready to go. So that's it for this assignment, but we're going to keep working a little bit further, and I'm going to show you how to do videos as well, so you know how to do videos. And once you have settings here and have how long it's going to take for each render, going to a video is pretty simple. So if I want to go into this and do a video, I'm going to go to my render tab over here in my property panel, and in there or actually we're going to go to output property, scroll down to media type, and from image we're going to say video instead. Normally this encoding tab is closed by default, so it shouldn't be open or anything like that. So you're just going to expand this encoding file here. And then the container, this one, I think this file is the default one. We're going to be saving all of our files as MP4 videos. So you just go to the encoding drop-down, container, MPEG4, and then now it should be able to render out a full video. So if I go to render an animation, I already chose my file location, so now it's saving this video into the location that I'm rendering out to. I'm going to give it a few frames, but then I can just hit exit out up here to cancel my render, just to get a little bit going just for the video's sake. So there is my POU number 3 video test. I can open that up in a video player, and now you can see it's just a couple frames inside there for my video. Same thing, you can turn that in if you have an MP4 video for this file submission, but that's about it for EV's rendering engine at least. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and even if we want to use a different rendering engine, having your output going to this location and changing some of the settings like your MPEG4, make sure it's saving to an MP4 video, we should be set from there. But now I want to do one for cycles. It's a good habit to go in here and change my video name as I'm going. So this is my test video. I'm going to do this as POU number 3 cycles. There we go. And accept. So now I just changed my name so I don't overwrite the last video I just did. So it's a good habit to get into, like changing that name frequently. Next, we're going to go back up to render properties to see about plugging in some other settings for our other rendering engines. Real quick, workbench renders are kind of really handy as well, where if you want to see the animation of stuff and the timing of everything, workbench is really handy where we can just go render an animation, and you can see it'll go pretty quick. It's about 0.03 seconds or 3 milliseconds per frame or so. So it'll go through and render the whole image out or the whole animation out really quickly. It's already almost done, but I'm just going to cancel that. And we can see here's that render. So actually I'm going to rename this and say this is my workbench. There we go. And since I named this video a different name than the cycles render or the cycles file, I can just re-render the cycles and it's not going to overwrite this since I changed its name. So maybe I could even do that over here, test video, change that file name, and then it shouldn't overwrite that same file when we render again. So now that's Workbench, really nice and simple. The weird thing of Workbench, you can see at the top for our types of renders, I can go to this top bar here and use my scroll wheel to move all the way over. And you can see we have wireframe, solid view, and just our rendered image is still kind of like what it looks like while we're modeling. If I change this to cycles now, then you see you have that fourth sphere pop back up for the rendered result. So I'm going to leave this as our solid shading. Maybe in my camera view I could go all the way over to the left or the right side, change that to my rendered preview, and then I can see what that's going to look like. So from there, this is going to be cycles, and there's a lot more settings inside of here that we can work with. So we have here on our device, you can use GPU or your CPU to render that out and see basically which render looks better. And a lot of it is kind of trial and error, where it's good to render a still image and render it on the CPU, do one render for that, maybe save that file, render it a second time on the GPU, and compare the quality of both images as well as the time. What you're going for is keeping nice quality images while reducing the amount of time it takes to render. So you can see a lot of my settings are already set that way, where for instance my sampling here, your default sampling might be like your your viewport samples down here might be like 1,000 samples, and then you can see right below that is your render samples. So that might be, I think by default, somewhere in the 4,000 frames or 4,000 samples for that. Noise threshold as well, by default it does for your render 0.01 noise threshold. And if you do it that way, we can just render an individual image right now, and you can see it's going to go and try to go through 4,000 of these samples, and it's going to take quite a bit of time to go through all that. It might reduce that and speed up quite a bit once it gets pretty good progress inside that render. But we're already at 16 seconds, almost 20 seconds, and it's still not done rendering. But if you really look at the image as it's going through all these samples, you don't see a lot of improvement after this. So even after sample 40 or so, there's not a lot of change going on. So I might be able to reduce those samples and speed up my time a little bit. So I can just hit cancel here, just close out of this window. And that's what I kind of went through with a lot of these settings. Noise threshold, I always take my render and match it with my viewport. And just do 0.1 is good enough. Maybe if you're doing a really high-end rendering or something like that, you can go back through and increase some of these numbers. But even for most of my videos that I've posted, and like all of my videos that I've shown you on YouTube, a lot of those were pretty simple and not too complicated because I was trying to render things out pretty quickly. So same thing with my viewport. A good way to see how long it's taking to see all this stuff, I'm gonna exit out of my camera view in this screen, and you can kind of scroll around in our render, and then you can see off to the top left the samples here that it's going through before it kind of just starts skipping ahead, and then it's getting up to a few hundred, and then it just says done. But really, if I scroll around and look and watch that sample, right about here, I don't see too much more change. You can see a little bit, but 40 samples is kind of like my go-to, where 40 samples is good enough. There's not too much changing after 40. And even in the last class, I think I did 10 samples for my end result just to reduce time. So I'm just going to say 40 for right now. And I'm going to do the same settings for my end result as well as my render, just to get started a little bit. It is nice to be able to have a good preview that looks good, and then your render can even be higher quality. But for what we're doing in this basic class, keeping these the same is going to be good enough. Also from there, if you don't have these checked, you can see if you denoise is unchecked, it's going to leave that image very grainy, or it's going to have noise inside that render. That's what a lot of that graininess is called. It's just noise inside your render. So if you denoise it, it looks really nice and clean. The one issue with denoising sometimes you might get is when you're moving around with textures, it might look like it's kind of flashing a little bit, but it'll be good enough for what we're working on for sure. So now from there, if I go to render and I render an image out, we can see how long it's going to take to render, and just kind of compare the quality of my render versus the time that it takes to render that out. So here it's almost done with the sample. Takes about 14 seconds so far. Let it finish up. But same thing with this whole image, since it's going to denoise all this once it's done. There's our end result image. Took 23 seconds to make this. I can go up here, image, save as, and I'm just going to say this is run POU3 cycles render number 1. So then I can save this image and compare it to other settings that I change in my next revision of this. So I could even go in here and say, maybe let's do 10 samples, see if we can reduce that time a little bit. And then let's just go render an image and see if we can keep the same quality of render video as well as reduce our time and see if that will work. And there we got 8 seconds. So that's a lot better. I can go image, save as, and this is render number 2. Save that image, close out of my render window, and now if I open that up, here we can see cycles render number 1, and there's that one. If we go to render number 2, and if we switch back and forth, you can kind of see some change going on between those. Number 1 looks pretty detailed if I zoom into like here. And then if I go to render number 2, it almost looks like it's hiding this top line. It's hard to see when I zoom in, but if I go back and forth, if I look at one point in my render, you can kind of see it's changing some stuff just enough, but if it's reducing that much time, it might be worth doing. So that's kind of how I go through and set a lot of my settings. Same thing with everything else. I just close my sampling, go through a lot of these, and just kind of one by one work on changing the settings until it looks good. So like light paths, I think I went through here. Your max bounces might be the default still. It might be like 12 for total and some other ones for the rest. What I just do to start is change all those to 1, see what the result looks like in your time, and then slowly increase those to like your total bounces, increase it to 2. Same thing if you have transparent things, maybe increase that to 2, and compare your result time versus the quality and see kind of your personal preference for your settings and that kind of stuff. I have motion blur checked, which is kind of a cool setting. I covered that a little in class, where you can actually add motion blur to your renders. Performance is a good one to work on a little bit as well. Performance, you can choose your compositor CPU versus GPU, just like how you have your device up here for a CPU and GPU for your cycles engine up there. You also have your denoising, I don't know what it says on there, let's open this up. Denoising device, you could do auto, CPU or GPU for that as well. Same thing, just render 3 images, each with a different setting of it, and just change one setting at a time. So then you can choose CPU or GPU for all that kind of stuff as well. There's also some other ones that you can go through and change, but I think the most of the ones that I chose in our class was sampling, light paths, as well as performance were the ones that I was working on changing. So other than that, everything should be good from there. Go through and test some settings out and everything like that, render some settings out. If you go to your output, the only key thing that I want to just refresh is making sure you choose your file of where your output is going to. Media type should be on image or video. I think I just leave mine on video, and you can still just do render an image, and that should be fine. So maybe just leave that on video. And then your encoding, that tab you just open up and choose MPEG4, and that'll give you that MP4 video format. Otherwise from there, that's about it for POU number 3. So I might just save my project, and that should be it for that one. Submit your file, your Blender or 3ds Max file, as well as your render, and then tell me how long it took to render your still image. So I could go back to render, view my render, and this last render just only took 8 seconds and 53 milliseconds. So turn all that in for the assignment, and that should be it. But yeah, I think that should be covered for this assignment. Let me know if you have any questions. You can just shoot me a message, and I should be able to get back to it. And then we'll cover the rest of the stuff for everything else going into this assignment later on. But that should be it for this one. Good luck, and hopefully it works out.